Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jalavallabha Kunjaradhari Jaya Gopi Jalavallabha Girivara Jaya Gopi Jalavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jai Gaur Premanandi. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivjakacharya Stasto Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivjakacharya Stasto Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki. Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from 3rd Canto, Chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, Text 34. Bhūtānāṁ chidra-dātṛtvaṁ bahir antaram evacha prāṇendriyātma-dhiṣṇyatvaṁ nabhaso vṛtti-lakṣaṇam bhūtānāṁ chidra-dātṛtvaṁ bahir antaram evacha prāṇendriyātma-dhiṣṇyatvaṁ nabhaso vṛtti-lakṣaṇam bhūtānāṁ chidra-dātṛtvam bahir antaram evacha prāṇendriyātma-dhiṣṇyatvam nabhaso vṛtti-lakṣaṇam. Vaishnavis. Bhūtānāṁ, of all living entities. Chidra-dātṛtvaṁ, the accommodation of room. Bahir, external. Antaram, internal. Eva, also. Cha, and. Prāṇa, of the vital air. Indriya, the senses. Ātma, and the mind. Dhiṣṇyatvam, being the field of activities. Nabhasaḥ, of the ethereal element. Vritti, activities. Lakṣaṇam, characteristics. Translation: the activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as accommodation for the room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The mind, the senses, and the vital force or living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eyes. Form rests in subtle existence in the sky, and internally it is perceived as the veins within the body and the circulation of the vital air. Externally, there are invisible forms of sense objects. The production of the invisible sense objects is the external activity of the ethereal element, and the circulation of vital air and blood is its internal activity. The subtle form exists in the ether has been proven by modern science by transmission of television, by which forms or photographs of one place are transmitted to another place by the action of the ethereal element. That is very nicely explained here. This verse is the potential basis of great scientific research work, for it explains how subtle forms are generated from the ethereal element, what their characteristics and actions are, and how the tangible elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth, are manifested from the subtle form. Mental activities or psychological actions of thinking, feeling, and willing are also activities on the platform of ethereal existence. The statement in Bhagavad-gītā that the mental situation at the time of death is the basis of the next birth is also corroborated in this verse. Mental existence transforms into tangible form as soon as there is an opportunity due to contamination or development of the gross elements from subtle form. Translation again. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as accommodation for the room, for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhaktivrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So what we are hearing in this verse are the insights into the subtle realm of existence, which is quite unknown to us. How these subtle forms exist in the ether, what is the origin of these subtle forms, how these different material elements, air, water, fire, are manifested from the subtle form. As we read in the 3rd canto, Lord Brahma explains the process of creation and how from one subtle element, another gross element is created, and so on and so forth. And so this sound very mysterious to us, subtle elements, because we have in our experience reality of gross matter, something that we can't see doesn't exist. But this is a more deeper science, still on a material platform, but for those who have higher sense of faculties, just like we hear in the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridayadi Kavaye, that Lord Vishnu imparted the Vedic knowledge to Brahma, into the heart of Brahma, the original living being. And so Lord Vishnu didn't have to sit down with Brahma and get a textbook and explain to him how the creative process should function. No, because of Brahma's advanced faculties, he was able to transmit knowledge on this subtle platform through the heart. They don't need to sit down, write, memorize, see how to execute it, plan, strategize. No, because of their advanced intelligence, Brahma was able to just hear the instructions of Lord Vishnu in the heart and execute those instructions. And so everything begins from the subtle platform. If you look at any creative process, even on a mundane material platform, we use our subtle senses to desire, to think, to create ideas. As we read in Bhagavad-gītā, we have a gross body and a subtle body. So our gross body is these physical elements, water, fire, air, water, fire, air, earth, and so on and so forth. And the subtle elements are mind, intelligence, and false ego. And so the creative process begins on a subtle platform. We start to think, we start to have desires, have ideas. And as we know, the function of the mind is thinking, feeling, and willing. And with the mixture of our desires and our intelligence, we bring our desires to fruition in the physical reality. And so similarly, we are reading in this chapter how one subtle element creates another element. We have read in the past, in the previous verses, how subtle sound is the source of creation for the ethereal sky. And we'll read in the coming verses how from ethereal sky time is created, and from that element of touch is created. And so Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us a very scientific analysis of the laws of nature, its origin, and more importantly, our relationship with the source of everything, that ultimate source. As Prabhupada writes in the preface of Srimad Bhagavatam, that Srimad Bhagavatam is the transcendental science, not only for knowing the ultimate source of everything, but also for knowing our relationship with Him and our duty towards the perfection of human society on the basis of that perfect knowledge. And so we might think of Srimad Bhagavatam as some, ancient, old, antiquated, religious book that might not have any use, any application in 21st century. But no, what we are getting here, Lord Kapila Dev is giving us the whole blueprint of how material existence work. And when we read about these creative processes, it helps us understand that we as individual beings are separate from all these material elements. One thing I want to emphasize is that we have to understand that subtle elements also have form. The mind, the senses, the vital force, or the living entity have forms, although they are not visible to the naked eye, as we hear in the purport. And so it's quite difficult for us to process how subtle elements have forms. As we read in Srimad Bhagavatam that each material element has a personified deity, just like the personified deity for water is Varuna, the demigod Varuna. And so all the different elements are controlled by different demigods, these higher beings. And the whole cosmic manifestation is governed and managed by individuals who have forms. The whole cosmic universe is a combination of different energies. Just like we understand from the Bhagavad-gītā that there are three principal energies: external energy, internal energy, and the marginal energy. And so external energy consists of the 24 elements, beginning with Mahat-tattva, the 10 knowledge-acquiring senses, and working senses, and so on and so forth. And similarly, in internal energy consists of the samvit potencies, the sandhini potency, and the ladini potency. And of course, the marginal energy consists of the part and parcels living entity of Krishna. And so all these different energies have form. Again, something for us might be hard to understand. How can water have a form? Is there a water in itself is a substance, but there's a form behind it? And actually, when we say form, we mean that there is a person. All these different energies are managed and controlled by a person, by a source. Just like Prabhupada often gives this example of the electrical energy. We don't, although ordinarily we might see electrical energy as just some vague, just some energy flowing in the walls, giving us functional appliances. But behind the electrical energy, there is the engineer who is controlling that energy. And so similarly, we are living in a cosmic manifestation which is surrounded by different energies, and all those energies have an energetic source. And so, going deeper into understanding why is it difficult for us to wrap our heads around that everything has a form, that every subtle element has a form, and there's a person controlling all these different energies. And the main cause deep down, the defect with our mentality in understanding that, is because of our subtle, unconscious, subtle conscious status of being impersonalist. We have this gross mentality that just everything that we see has a form, but everything that we don't see doesn't have a form. And so we are working on this default of impersonalism, deep down, deep-rooted. Just like, when you fly in planes, there's this default set to autopilot, or in our devices we have default configurations, can have a default wallpaper and ringtone and so on and so forth. And so similarly, we have this default of being impersonalist deep down, and it comes out through these doubts that makes us think, why does everything has form? Just like we also have this idea that
Our default in material existence is life is meant for enjoyment. Life is meant to have fun. It's like I remember my mother telling me one time that God has given us this body to enjoy, to have fun. So why don't you go out and have fun and enjoy your life? And so that's our default configuration. We think that's what life is meant to be, to enjoy separately from Krishna. And so similarly, we have this default mindset that anything spiritual doesn't have a form. And so understanding this reality that the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person can be very difficult for many of us. Maybe in the beginning, maybe now we are through the process, the therapeutic process of bhakti, we are coming to this realization, but still it's difficult for us to wrap our heads around how the Absolute Truth is not just some vague cloud of energy, but is a person, Krishna. And doing more analysis, we understand that the root cause of this impersonalist mindset is our enviousness towards Krishna. For those of you who have thoroughly studied and read Bhagavad-gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam, you understand that Krishna's position, more than being the supreme controller, is that he is the supreme enjoyer. Krishna has perfect relationships, perfect pastimes with his friends, with his parents, with his girlfriends. Krishna knows how to enjoy and how to get perfect pleasure. And so when we understand the science of Krishna, right away we become envious because we want what Krishna has. We want to take up the position of Krishna. We want to be the supreme enjoyer. And that's because of our enviousness of Krishna. And so when we look at that envy and transform that envy into service, into love, into appreciation, that's where we can start making some substantial changes in our consciousness. However, we have to also understand that these forms that we are hearing in this verse, these subtle forms, how they are manifested from one element to another, they are all material forms. But Krishna's form is very different from any of the material form. It's extraordinary. Every part of Krishna's body is spiritual. There is no tinge of material contamination. Saumya Vapu, the most beautiful form of Krishna. 5,000 years ago, when Krishna was present, was manifested on this planet, everyone was attracted just by the form of Krishna, just by his beauty. His name, his form, his characteristics, his pastimes are all attractive. Why is that? Because they are all non-material. They are all out of this world. Krishna's body it is said that every part of Krishna's body is made of concentrated clouds of bliss. So Krishna's body gives him enjoyment to the supreme level. We read in Laghu Bhagavatamrita that there are three most glorious forms of the Supreme Person, which are designated or labeled as Paravastha, or like the most perfect form of the Supreme. And so although all the incarnations and avatars of Krishna are Vishnu Tattva, are perfect, but there are these three forms known as Paravastha, which are the most perfect in the sense of exhibiting the supreme opulence and qualities. And so what are these three forms. Number 1, Nrsimha. Number 2, Lord Ramchandra. And number 3, Krishna. And so progressively, as we go from Nrsimha, Lord Ramchandra and Krishna, we see the greater completeness in their qualities. In Padma Purana, it is said that Krishna exhibits and contains all the 6 qualities in fullness in his stature as the Supreme Person. And so Krishna's sweetness and his opulence is unparalleled compared to the other incarnations, the other avatars. As it is said in the 10th canto, Yasyanam makara kundala charukarna bhrajat kapala subhagam savilasa hasam nityo savam na tatrupur trishibhi pibantyo naryo narascha murita kupito nimescha. Nityotsavam, that looking at Krishna is like being in a festival. Krishna's face is decorated with ornaments, his earrings resembling like sharks, his ears are beautiful, his cheeks are beautiful, his smiling attracts everyone. And so just by meditating on the form of Krishna, we can attain the ultimate perfection. Looking at Krishna is like seeing a festival. And so we are celebrating the festival of Kartik. We are worshipping Damodar Krishna, Yashoda Krishna. And we sing every day, Namamishvaram Satchit Ananda Rupam, that the form of the Supreme Person is Satchit Ananda, is embodiment of eternal existence, knowledge and bliss. That Krishna's, we want to worship the Supreme Person who has a body which is not like any other material body. His body is embodiment of eternal existence, knowledge and bliss. Just think about, try to wrap your heads around, Krishna's body is made of concentrated clouds of bliss. I mean, bliss in itself is, it's a far out idea in material existence, bliss. If only we can get some enjoyment, some momentary happiness, we feel satisfied. What to speak of bliss or ecstasy. But this is the process of Krishna consciousness, that just by meditating on Krishna's form, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's activities, Krishna's names, we are directly connecting ourselves to the ultimate highest source of pleasure, the reservoir of pleasure. And so just by meditating and focusing our senses, our energies on Damodar Krishna, on Yashoda Krishna, we can achieve the highest ultimate perfection. And interestingly, it all begins with meditating on the name. It is said, just by focusing and meditating on Krishna's name, naturally, organically, Krishna's form is manifested. Krishna reveals his form to us. So it's not that we have to imagine something, speculate and contemplate different ideas on how Krishna looks. Of course, we can come to the temple and meditate on the deity and look at them for ages. They wouldn't take any offense or like, why are you staring at me for so long? But just by going deeper into our Nam sadhana, the focus and meditation on chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, naturally everything is revealed to us. Krishna's name, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's form, Krishna's activities, and so on and so forth. And so in this auspicious month of Kartik, we have the greatest opportunity to meditate on Krishna's childhood pastimes, on Krishna's childhood form, Damodar Krishna, which interestingly is only manifested in Gokula, in Bhauma Vrindavan, and not in Goloka, the topmost spiritual abode. And so, being the practitioners of Krishna consciousness, we have the greatest opportunity to make our life perfect by engaging in this simple process of going deeper into our sadhana of chanting Hare Krishna, and just through that, everything will be revealed to us in due course. Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments by senior Vaishnavas? Rabindranath Prabhu.
You mentioned about having a default position of impersonalism. Could you give a reference for that, please?
Well, reference is my spiritual master. I'm just repeating what I've heard. I think he does mention that in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's explained in chapter 7 Adi Leela, how we are living entities are functioning in that mindset of just being impersonalist, and that is showcased in our behavior, in our perception towards life. And so that's all the reference I could give. I don't know the exact verse that will translate to that statement.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thanks for the wonderful class. You mentioned that all these subtle energies in the material universe have forms, but it's shouldn't we not be too distracted anyways? Because like you look at your phone, there's all these like distractions, you know. And for someone who's a devotee, they should just like focus on what's real, you know. And I don't think it's like impersonal to ignore subtle forms, because you know, if you wanted to go down the rabbit hole, there's probably tons of weird stuff, you know. So, but with devotees, they have, you know, their subtle natures that is determined by their consciousness, and that we have to be, I think, considerate and gentle with. But like the modes are very vicious, and so can you comment on that, the distinction between like the personal nature of someone's subtle identity versus like the modes, which are very distracting?
We are living in an age of distraction, and so we have to guard ourselves from being influenced by these material energies. Of course, we have our own individual spiritual identity, which comes in a more advanced stage. But at the same time, we also have to admit that we are, at the end of the day, human beings. Spiritual beings having human experience. We are in a human body. So we have our own psychophysical nature. And through the process of Krishna consciousness, we are trying to dovetail our natures in executing our services. And so the more we are authentic and honest with ourselves in where we are at in our spiritual life, the more we see how our psychophysical material natures are orchestrated. Because many times, because living in degraded Kali Yuga, it's just really hard for individuals to understand, what am I good at? What should I do in my life? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Many times these educational institutions, they do aptitude test to find out what you will be good at. Should you go on in sports, or should you go in this career or that field? In living in this age, everything is just topsy-turvy. It's hard to understand and find our materially inclined nature that we can use in Krishna's service. But again, we should also not get caught up in just doing a deep research and trying to find what's my nature, what is the job that I should do that will just satisfy me, and then I can use that for Krishna. No, we should just understand the times that we are living in and focus our energies in executing and performing Krishna conscious activities in the association of advanced devotees. And through that, everything, even materially, we start to understand things about us, about ourselves. At least that's how it has been in my own experience. Because our minds are so fogged with gunk and with degradations, and so we can't really see our own material nature. And so when through the process, the side effect of cleansing of the material contaminations, we are slowly able to understand where we are at materially. What am I good at? What am I not good at? Am I a people's person? Or am I more like an isolated individual who likes to just be by myself, and so on and so forth? And so just by engaging in Krishna conscious activities, everything slowly starts to gets more clear. We get more clarity in life, what we want to do and how we want to execute devotional service. Archita Prabhu.
Thank you for a very, very nice class, Prabhu. Your answer to his question was a little bit, I think a more direct answer is that on the path of bhakti, we don't ignore anything. Because as Krishna orders us, we should see everything in him and him in everything. And if we get to that stage, then we're never lost to him and he's never lost to us. Mm-hmm. So in order to get to that point, though, you have to purify your existence. If you just try to ignore things that are disturbing, it may work for some time. Like Vishwamitra Muni, he was meditating with his eyes closed, trying to ignore everything. But just the sound of the tinkling ankle bells of Menaka dragged them down to material, contamination. So the bhakti yogi doesn't try to ignore the world. We try to employ everything in Krishna service. Before we get to that point of seeing Krishna in everything, we employ everything. Mm-hmm. We employ everything. And by that determination to employ everything in Krishna service, purification takes place where we're not deviated anymore by anything on the material platform. Just like Shukadeva Goswami, walking naked, passing naked ladies, not at all affected. It's not that he didn't see them or he was trying to ignore them. He was not affected because he's on that platform of seeing Krishna everywhere and being completely in compact with Krishna at every moment. So that's what we're trying for. We're not trying to ignore the world. We're trying to use the world in Krishna's service as far as possible. Everything, Prabhupada said, we're not enemies of technology or machines. Use them in Krishna's service. So when you get to that point, then gradually, the attraction to them goes away, and then you're not distracted anymore. Mm-hmm. If you're not attracted, then you're not distracted. Just again, like Shukadeva. He was not attracted to those ladies, and therefore he was not distracted by them. But we can't fake that platform. It only comes by purification. When you're actually purified, your senses are purified, you're back on the spiritual platform, then you're not attracted to anything material, and therefore you're not distracted by anything material.
Okay, there you have it, Kevin. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.